Moving on to our first panel, with thanks to Dr. Gupta for a fantastic introduction. Again, the words being used are inspiration and innovation. And indeed, this panel, I think, sums up so much of that and so much of what we can benefit from the cooperation and shared experience of today. I'm delighted to announce onto the stage to take a seat our moderator for the panel, Janet Pao. Janet joins us from Hong Kong, where she's the project director for the Asia Business Council, co-author of the book Through the Eyes of Tiger Cubs. She joins us to moderate today's panel, an expert in growth and development, and all together, an expert in growth and development. And joining her on the stage, we have Vishal. Hi. Vishal Dharmadhikari, excuse me, joins us as one of the Israel Asia Leaders Fellow. He is originally from India, and this is a phenomenal young man with some fantastic innovation and development experience of his own. He is developing an e-learning leadership training program for business students in India and Israel, and also is key to developing the India-Israel Cybersecurity Connect, which is being incorporated into the 3rd annual International Cybersecurity Conference, due to take place just in a few weeks in June 9th to the 14th in Tel Aviv. He grew up in India and Botswana, and we're delighted to welcome him today. Joining us also, we have Hun Jang Cho. Good morning. After serving as a Korean Navy intelligence officer, Hun worked as a PR consultant, back to my world, with P&G and UBS, and was a senior executive at Edelman in Korea, where he handled high-level projects before moving to be a delegation liaison officer in the Republic of Turkey at the 2012 Seoul Nuclear Security Summit. We're delighted to welcome him this morning. He is currently studying for a master's in conflict resolution and mediation at Tel Aviv University, and key to his achievements, as noted, is he reached the finals of the Holt Prize in London for a plan he developed with other Tel Aviv University students to combat global food insecurity, which is phenomenal. Joining us also, Jiyeon Ha, also one of our Israel Asia Leaders Fellows, studying and a member of Engineers Without Borders, where with who she's developed projects in Nepal. She is doing her first degree in civil and environmental engineering at the Israeli Technion Institute. Samuel Chan. Samuel, good morning, Samuel. Samuel joins us from Singapore. He is interning at Crystal Vision, which is an Israeli company that designs and develops automation and control systems for industry, agriculture, and research, and offers customized solutions to incorporate vision systems and manpower, saving machinery, such as in date farms and agriculture. We welcome you this morning. And finally, Nishant Jalgaonkar, you have to excuse my pronunciation. As part of also the enterprise program, Nishant is interning with SolChip, an Israeli cutting-edge company which deals with solar battery technology, integrating solar energy, of course, so important to our sustainable world. We welcome you all to the panel, and I hand over to Janet Pao to lead the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our MC for introducing all of us, and thank you again to the Israel Asia Center for gathering us here today so we can explore these exciting possibilities for collaboration between Israel and the many countries in Asia. Now, as we're looking at these opportunities for innovation and collaboration, it's very important to know what Asia needs, not just now, but in the next 10 to 20 years. And what are the innovations that will meet Asia's needs, and what are the priorities in terms of needs? I mean, it sounds like, even from what Dr. Gupta was talking about, Asia faces many, many challenges. Each country faces very different challenges. I can not think of a better group of people than really the next generation of leaders in Asia. You know, as you've heard, these are globally minded Asians, well-educated, having studied overseas, English speaking. They're going to go back to their countries as leaders in their countries, in business, governments, nonprofits. You know, what are their thoughts about Asia's challenges? in the next 10 to 20 years. And in my book, Through the Eyes of Tiger Cubs, Views of Asia's Next Generation, I call this generation the Tiger Cubs. And these are people who have grown up in the 80s and 90s in the midst of Asia's so-called tiger economies. And these are countries that have seen remarkable prosperity and growth over the last few decades. And really, they have grown up in a relative era of peace as well in Asia. But I think there's a sense, if you read in the news, in the New York Times and Financial Times, you can see a lot of articles talking about the acute challenges of Asia over the next decade. I actually was speaking on a similar kind of panel in Hong Kong, and I had a group of panelists who are experts on Asia. And people are very interested in the views of young Asians, and the experts were sharing about their views on the young Asians, and we got a question at the end of the panel. They said, "Where are the young Asians? Why don't we ask them to speak? Why don't we hear from them, their views on Asia?" So now I'm very delighted to have this group of panelists who are actually young Asians, who will speak about Asia and Asia's future from their perspective. So I want to actually start by asking our panelists, can you describe to us how your generation is different from the previous generation? You come from all different countries, Korea, Singapore, India. Tell us a little bit about your generation.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say that the older generation laid a foundation for the younger generation. And as the world continues to globalize and technology is integrated, I feel the younger generation today has numerous opportunities and they can initiate change much faster than the older generation. So,
yeah, actually, I feel that generation gaps are shrinking because some time ago, I would say that a generation gap existed between people who are 10 years apart. But now, more and more, I see that there are generation gaps that exist between people who are just 5 years apart, 3 years apart sometimes, because the kind of growth that technology has seen, the access to information that we have these days, it's really shrinking generation gaps.
Don't mind if I start? Yeah. One thing I see is that our generation, at least, we've grown up in, as Jeanette mentioned, prosperity and peace. And also with technology, one thing my generation faces is that we're very impatient. We're very patient for things to move. We want things like fast, right? We have fast food, we have SMSs, we have emails. No one really writes letters, not so much anymore at least, from what I know. And we want to see change fast, and we welcome change. And all the problems that we see, we all have ideas about it. And the next step then is to be able to find a team of people to actually bring our ideas forward and to have that motivation to bring it forward.
Kind of going off of what Samuel was saying, I think because our generation has grown up in such prosperity and just a lot of benefits resulting from our grandparents and our parents' generation, especially in more prosperous countries such as South Korea. I feel like this is probably maybe a little bit of a negative thing to say, but I feel like we've become very complacent in our mentality. We've just become very comfortable. We're used to getting access to things instantaneously, as you were saying. So yeah, on the positive side, it could lead to just a lot of innovation. We want things quickly, so it could motivate us to get things done quickly, more efficiently. But on the other hand, because we're used to having access to all that kind of technology, a lot of times it may lead to the opposite. We're just used to everything just being given to us. So a risk I think that our generation might have is just being very complacent.
So I want to add something shortly, because from my experience, like from my parents' generation, or my uncles or my grandmother's generation, it was after the war in Korea. So we have to build the country again. So like we were concentrating on the country, and also we wanted to have some more people in the country. So like people actually like think about country a lot. But nowadays, like we are quite developed and life is much more comfortable. And now we are always think about ourselves, and country and other things are behind. For example, like people don't want to getting married because they think it's a lot of money consuming and also it's hard. So they don't want to getting married or even also want to have baby. So I think we also need to think about more, our life is important, but without country we don't have our future. So I think we also have to learn many things.
Thanks very much. Now, if all of us are reading the global news, there's a lot of news about how you know, the U.S. After the global economic crisis is finally picking up after 5 years. Europe is in crisis. You know, the Middle East and Africa, there are a lot of problems as well. It seems like a lot of journalists and analysts talk about Asia being really the bright spot. I mean, it is the Asian century. It's the bright spot of the global economy. It's going to rescue the global economy. You know, there's this very strong sense of growth and optimism in Asia. But at the same time, you know, when you look at Asian newspapers, every day you will see news about protests in China, protests in India. You know, you hear about conflicts, you hear about these intractable problems that are in Asia as well. So this seeming, to me, it seems like, you know, there's this conflict between, you know, this growth on one hand and all these problems on the other hand. And I know that, you know, some of you have looked very, very deeply into these challenges in Asia. And, you know, I want to kind of set the stage for the panelists to actually share with you some of the big concerns they've been thinking about. So, you know, I'm actually going to walk through some of the broad areas and explore some of these areas of challenges together with the panelists. You know, one big area is energy, the environment, and food security. That, I think, is a shared concern among a lot of the young Asians. There's another area of income inequality and poverty, which is another big concern, a broad concern. And the third area is sort of people-related, human resource-related concerns, education, labor, demographics, and so forth. So I want to actually start with you know, the environment and agriculture and energy. Tell us a little bit about how serious these challenges are in Asia, you know, in your kind of sub-areas of expertise.
Well, I guess one thing that I would like to share regarding the issue of environmental problems specifically, is that it's not just like globalization. Through globalization, you know, how everything is connected. The environmental issues have also become connected between countries as well. So one specific example that I'd like to give is regarding the yellow sand in South Korea. Around springtime, what would happen is there would be a huge wave of yellow dust coming in from around China into South Korea, and it causes a lot of problems in terms of just like health problems. People have trouble breathing. It causes a lot of skin problems. So it's not created in Korea, but due to the erosion problems in China, for example, it causes, it influences other countries as well, such as South Korea. So what ends up happening is, right now, South Korea is planting trees in China in order to minimize the effect of the yellow sand coming into South Korea. So I just see a lot of connection in the environmental problem. It's not an isolated issue by country to country, but it's an issue that must be tackled together collaboratively.
I think another concern is industrialization, and as we continue to urbanize and establish new city centers, you know, we are damaging the environment, because to establish the critical infrastructure needed to sustain the population which would be placed in a future city, we're destroying trees, and all other environmental resources. So I think this is a major concern not only for India, but also China, because they need to establish these urban centers to host the other population, the growing population.
I would like to add what Hun Jang said about yellow sandstorm. It's coming to Korea and also Japan. So it's not only the problem between like Korea and Japan. They also have a problem in China. But I also want to add another problem because when we're talking about Asia, like Asia is a very big continent. So it's really easy to forget about also Central Asia. We have a RRC in Central Asia, which was the fourth biggest lake in the world, and now it's only the quarter size of it. As you all know, it was because Russia diverted the river, and then like there are not too much water going inside, so it's getting dry and dry. And another problem is because of the desertification, all the like substance, bad pollutant, we used to be in the like sediment, and it's come up to the surface, and there is a sandstorm again, and it's going to China, also Mongolia and Central Asia, which is quite toxic and it's dangerous. So we also need to think about like RRC problem all together in the world.
Just to wrap things, I mean, Janet mentioned 3 topics: energy, food security, and pollution. To give you a very specific example, in India, yes, there are problems of urbanization, but you see the rural population is also contributing to the pollution out of necessity. You will see that a large number of infant deaths in rural India are associated with suffocation due to smoke inhalation. And this smoke comes from them burning conventional fossil fuels or even unconventional fuels, such as just simply burning wood or coal. Now, burning these fuels is not only adding to your pollution, it is creating smoke, killing your infants. At the same time, they can't help it. To secure that food for themselves, they need that energy, and that is the only source of energy that they have access to.
For Singapore at least, we don't really face a lot of pressure on our own environment. Yeah, because we're so small and the whole place is urbanized. But I agree with Han Jang when he said that it's related between states. Regionally, I know we do get haze coming in once in a while from forest fires from other countries, and that becomes a concern for our country at least. And they do try and take action to assist and help to put out the forest fires. But another thing that actually concerns me also is about food security and food safety, which Jeanette did mention. Simply because food safety and food security, because of the imports and exports and the trade, it also becomes interrelated. And right now, I mean, globally, you do hear problems about food scares, about different chemicals being put into food and all that. And that does become a concern for my generation, at least, about what we consume in terms of food sources.
It sounds like you know, one of the common threads that I hear from the panelists is that in a way, especially emerging Asia, as economic growth continues, there are a lot of you know, Chinese, Indians, you know, different people in different parts of Asia who are creating these kinds of problems for Asia because they are aspiring to actually a higher standard of life. You know, as you have experienced in, you know, much of the Western developed worlds. I mean, you know, the Indians and Chinese are probably thinking, you know, I'm just trying to create a better life for my family. You know, I want a car, I want a home. But then if billions of people want a car and want to live in a bigger place, use more energy, that creates a lot of problems, from, you know, food supply to environmental issues and so forth. So, you know, that becomes a pretty intractable problem for Asia. And, you know, actually in our book, when we ask the young Asians, sort of generally environmental problems seems to be the most popular cited problem. And, you know, I'm actually really glad to hear over the past couple of days how Israel has many, many green innovations. So hopefully that's one area for potential collaboration. Now I want to then walk through the problems before we move into what you're all also interested in, the solutions. I want to get into income inequality and poverty. Can you tell us a little bit about how serious these problems are in the parts of Asia that you are familiar with?
Okay, I'll speak for, again, Singapore. I guess for my country at least, you don't really see poverty as a big problem like in India or China and Korea. But one thing we do face is when we're such a small space and our population is growing, that basic needs can't be met. For example, housing. Housing in Singapore is becoming more and more expensive, and if the income doesn't increase, which is one of the things we do see, and the income gap is widening. In fact, our middle class is slowly moving back. You see it diminishing, and that becomes a problem when people can't afford housing. And this is one of the big issues that even before I came to Israel was on the news about housing. For me, the reason why housing is such a big issue is because it's basic needs. People just need a roof over their heads, and when income inequality exists and policies are made to just to sustain the higher income groups, then that becomes a problem for my generation.
I think one issue very relevant to India is that the income difference between the middle class and the high class, it's bridging out basically, but the income between the middle class and the lower class, it's just getting wider. The gap is getting wider, and I think when you look at developed countries, some developed countries such as Korea or Singapore, you can see that the difference between the middle class and the higher class is actually.
Just to give you all an idea, I come from the financial capital of India, Bombay, and Bombay is a unique city in that it is the financial center of India, and yet in a city that has many of India's millionaires, it also has India's largest slum. So just to give you all a perspective that this is the kind of stark contrast that exists in Asian cities, that the city which is the financial capital of India also has India's largest slum in it. And this is the kind of economic disparity that exists within India.
Nishant, can you describe a little bit about that? We were talking about that, on our way over. Can you give sort of a more concrete description of what you're talking about?
All right. To give you all a bit of context, the slum that I'm referring to is called Dharavi, and if you actually try and understand the economy of Dharavi, you'll realize that it's a parallel economy to the rest of the city of Bombay. The economy of Dharavi, quite sadly, actually depends on the waste that is developed by the city of Bombay. So the city of Bombay's waste goes into Dharavi, they appropriate value from this waste and sell it back to the city. So this is what it has come to. Two parallel economies in the same city, one depending on the waste from the other.
And tell me a little bit about how this inequality is being manifested right now, because we hear a lot about back the last 2 years, the Occupy Wall Street movement, right? America is very concerned about inequality, and the Occupy movement has spread all around the world. We've seen it. We've seen young people camping out in Seoul. We've seen young people camping out in Hong Kong. Outside some of the corporate headquarters, we've seen people congregating in India, also parts of India, Occupy, right? The Occupy movement. So give us some insight into that. This income inequality, it seems to be worsening, even while countries seem to be, overall growing.
Well, to give you an insight, actually, yes, you're right. I mean, the youngsters of India are speaking out against this income inequality. They want to do something about it. But the thing is, the situation is so bad that at a cultural level, at some point, people decided that there's nothing that they can do about it. which is in fact one of the things that is unique about our generation. Our generation doesn't subscribe to that belief. We believe that the problem is big, but we can still make a change. Whereas some of our previous generations, they feel a sense of loss. They feel that they don't have any control over the situation.
One aspect that we can talk about regarding just the widening gap of income disparity is the fact that, first of all, the cost of living is rising for everyone, but as I forget who it was, but someone mentioned that the incomes don't rise according to the rising cost of living, and in countries like Korea, people invest a lot of money for education. The reason why they study so hard, why they strive and aspire to go to the top tier schools, is because they want to go to a good company in the future where they can make a better income and a better living. But the problem is a higher degree, a good degree, no longer guarantees you a successful job in the future. And a lot of qualified young people are finding that they're unable to find jobs, first of all, jobs period, or they're unable to find jobs that meet their qualifications. And this creates a lot of disillusionment, I think, within our generation, and especially among the middle class and educated young people in our generation. And so I think this is contributing to a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the dissatisfaction within our generation.
You're going to say something, Jill?
Yeah, I would like to add something more. Like in Asia, like Asian countries, we have something called like social status, which is like if you have a white collar job, then you are more respected, and if you have blue collar job, and you are less respected, or people look at you down a little bit. So in the West, those gaps are quite, small. But in Asia, it's quite big. That's why people are also like always seeking for the job who's, like earning more money and highly respected in society. So if there is a way and we can solve this problem, if you are really well-skilled construction worker, then you can if you can earn as much as money you can earn in the white-collar job, then, and also people can respect him more because he's skilled in his work. So I think it will be better if we can, we can solve this problem about the income inequality also.
It sounds like from some of the panelists that skills, I hear skills and education being a big factor, right? It doesn't, it sounds like, on the one hand, in Asia, if you look at the education statistics, it's getting better and better. Scores are getting better and better, but this seems to be sort of also a mismatch. Education or a degree no longer guarantees that you're going to have a successful career. So that seems to be one of the problems. This seems to be a good segue to kind of move on to our third area of challenge. The people challenges, I like to call it, or the human resource challenges associated with education and labor. Give us a little bit more insight into this area.
Well, education is a big challenge for India, and it's not. I think the Indians have really made an effort to propagate education, like in rural centers. For example, you have Teach for India initiative, which has tried to branch out to different rural centers, try and educate the population. But I also feel at the same time that the quality of education we receive has to improve.
Yeah, to add on to Vishal, in Korea, it's not the quantity of education. Everyone everyone has at least a high school education. Most people go off to college, and many people go even to higher degrees right now. So it's not the quantity of education that's the issue, but as Vishal was saying, it's the quality that people receive and why they go in, why they study, why the purpose of education, if I can call it that. Because I feel like, at least in Korea, the purpose of education, why people want to study so hard and why they want to go to such a good school, is because they want to go into one of the major conglomerates. And the system of education, and in order for you to get into that corporate world, you have to go to those top tier schools. And the result of that, what ends up happening is people in middle school, high school, even elementary school, they all study not for the sake of learning, but for the sake of excelling in a standardized exam, university entrance exam. And so the mentality of the students, it's not to learn, but it's mostly to memorize. And mostly they're learning to prepare how to excel at a particular exam that honestly probably won't benefit them and won't stay with them, for the rest of their lives. So I think the mentality needs to change. The system needs to change so that the kids are inspired to learn for the sake of learning, not for the sake of going to a particular school or eventually a particular company.
I agree with what Han said, but to add to that, India is a country that's going to have more than 700 million young people, and I think it's a challenge basically to educate these youngsters, give them a different perspective, adding on to the Indian perspective. So.
Okay. Singapore, firstly, I'll start off, is very well known for our good education system. I believe we are ranked like world class or something. But one of the issues I do see, we're good in maths and science, but we're not good in innovation. Why I say this is, right now the government is trying to encourage entrepreneurship in the society by providing a lot of funds, a lot of support, but at the same time, the youngsters are not taking it up. They're not taking the opportunity, and I believe this is a cultural problem. It's not that there's a lack of opportunities. In my country, we are exactly the same. We're taught you do standardized tests. When you get good grades, you're well respected. Your parents will be excited for you because then they can tell their relatives how well you did in school and what rank, and you get some award and all that. It's real. Okay, these the kind of pressures that I faced. These are the kind of pressures that I believe even my younger generation faces right now, and it is a system issue. But at the same time, I believe that it's an issue that cannot just be like solved by the government, and this is where innovation can come in. People can, like Mind Lab yesterday we heard, coming up with different kind of education systems where you can actually help children to learn in a different way. The thing is, I heard a TED talk about a week ago by Ken Robinson. He's a guy from UK who's talking in American TED. One thing he said, even about the American system, which I find applicable to even the Singapore system, is how the nature of people is not the same as the way education is being taught right now. Okay, people are diverse, we are creatives, but at the same time, the education system that we are moving towards is conformity and standardization. And that, in a sense, shrinks our ability and shrinks our potential to actually go out there and innovate and create the future.
I just want to share my experience as living as a student in Korea. So, like for example, you are in high school, let's say, you go to school at 8:30 in the morning and you finish class at 5:30. And then you have something called self-study at school, which will continue until 10 at night. And then you're going to after academy, which is you learn more science, math, or history, or English. So it will continue until 1 in the morning. Then you wake up at 7 again, and you start the routine again and again and again. That's what I also did in high school. I wasn't sure it's efficient. You sitting down, I mean, you're sitting in the chair like, 10 hours or even like if you are not sleeping or eating, that means you are sitting and study. Like, I'm not a machine, and like this phenomenon is going to even primary school students. They finish, luckily they finish at 2, but they're going to after school academy, which will end at 9. Then when they gonna play, what they gonna remember in the future about their childhood? So I think kids had to be, like kids supposed to be, play outside and touch things and play with, other friends and having fun. And also that's what you're gonna remember in the future, and also this will be the way you're gonna teach you to your kids. So I think we need some change in the education.
I think it's kind of funny because we're called here Tiger Cubs, and that implies we have tiger parents, tiger moms, tiger dads, and I think the mentality does need to change in the system as well, but also in the families. The emphasis on the parents, it's not just go get good grades, go to a good school. It has to change from the household, from the family setting as well, I think.
Don't get me wrong, I also want to share more story with my experience then. Okay, my parents always think, okay, kids have to be play like kids. So like until I reach age of 15, like my parents doesn't want me to go to, such a like academy, after school academy. But like after I finish school at 2 or even earlier, I always, play with my friends. And also I went to after school academy, but for like learning piano because I wanted to. So like if, as Hun Jang said, other parents can think this way, then it will be better in terms of education.
Just to add on to what they've already said, they've mentioned some stories and we laughed at them. Of course, they sound funny to us. But just to give you all a perspective, and they've mentioned this to me, South Korea as well as India has a high rate of student suicides. These pressures are not jokes. They are not, we can discuss them on this panel lightly, but there are those who are actually killing themselves because they can't cope with these pressures. So these are very serious concerns that they are talking about.
It's very, I think now you've had a chance to hear some of the personal stories and, of growing up in Asia and going through the education systems in Asia. When the world and, President Obama is talking about a sort of a Sputnik moment where there's a global race to better education and Asia is overtaking everyone. Now we hear a very different picture. I hope that helps you, I think, understand a little bit kind of fuller picture of what's going on. And, from hearing from what you say, I think, well, education systems in Asia are all different, but I think what is interesting to me is how there really is the common theme that runs across is that there's a real culture of performance and conformity, which over the last few days, I think it's a little bit different from what I hear the Israeli education system is like. An emphasis on creativity and not conforming, asking questions, not necessarily deference to authority, but it's a very different culture in Asia, and I think it gives us a lot to think about in terms of what this means in terms of partnering or collaborating. What does this mean? Now, we've spent a bit of time talking about the broad areas of challenges. And of course, we can dig much deeper into each of them. And I hope you have the opportunity later to talk to all of us and panelists on each of the issue areas that you're interested in. But I do want to spend some time talking about what the young Asians think are some of the solutions and how technology and innovation can, in fact, help resolve some of these challenges or help Asia make progress on some of these challenges. So I'm going to go back to the area of the environment and food security first and ask the panelists to tell us a little bit about your ideas. What can be done about these intractable problems. I mean, you go to, intergovernmental organizations. They have spent years on this, you know, with Kyoto Protocol and different conventions, and they're trying to reach consensus, and it doesn't seem like things are progressing very much. So what do you think can be done?
I think first of all, technology can be used to create awareness, and this awareness should go hand in hand with change in attitude. You see, because I think just propagating a solution, just creating awareness is not enough. It must be embraced. And I feel technology such as, for example, the Indian government came up in collaboration with a British company called DataWind. They developed tablet computers which cost as little as $50, which is still not affordable for the Indian population. But I feel technological innovations such as the tablet can be, can reach out to the population and can create awareness about environmental issues.
This is not necessarily a technological innovation, but in terms of innovation, just a concept that's been really gaining momentum recently is the social enterprises. And as was mentioned in my introduction, I had the opportunity to participate in a competition to develop a business model for social enterprises. And this competition specifically was about resolving the food crisis in urban slums, but I feel this is applicable for any other kind of social or environmental issue. I think whether it's just pure government or just pure for-profit corporations doing corporate social responsibility activities, there's a clear limitation to the extent how much dent they can put into resolving these big social issues. And although I admit that it's too soon to tell how effective that these hybrid entities called social enterprises will have, what kind of effect they will have in the long term, I feel like the innovation that the different mentality that the social enterprises bring, it could be a game changer, I believe. And so it's combining just the innovation that you find within business, and you are trying to make a sustainable for-profit organization, but at the same time, the product or the service that you're offering is something that directly helps resolve an issue, a major issue in the world. So I think that's the difference from corporate social responsibility, which is just more of a side project of companies that have other priorities in mind. So I think one option, as I'm saying, is social enterprises.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Han Jang said about social enterprises, and I'll tell you why. My generation is a thinking generation. Okay, we have information access. If we want things to happen, we have it. We have news. We can get almost anything we want by going to the internet. At least most of us. Yeah. And the thing is that we realize that initiatives and change needs to be ground up. Okay? It cannot be top down anymore, because the people who are affected by this are the people on the ground. And for social enterprises, they manage to do that by achieving solutions, by talking to people on the ground, and by being for the people. Okay, these are, I guess, the solutions that actually think through and live the life of the people who are actually there. And that's why I really think social enterprises would be one of the big things, big solutions.
And I like the fact that technology is actually aiding in this process, because technology is providing social enterprises with the tools they need to function. Simple things like access to information through the internet, and now we have advances in technology like 3D printing, which are making it so easy for people to build things. You know, there's this huge maker movement and the tinkering movement that's going on around the world globally, which is empowering people to solve their own problems and empowering them by giving them the tools required to actually deal with these problems. So I feel technology is really aiding social enterprises make a deeper impact.
As Nishant said, like it's important to people to actually like participate and make something, which is called appropriate technology. Like when you hear the words technology or engineer or engineering, sounds really hard and horrible. But appropriate technology is like we saw in the video before, the like Indian girl was, you know, like generating like hydro energy from, you know, like using like her feet, and also like you see without electricity the washing machine works. So I think it's also important to like people to like, you know, really as everyone said, like participate and also like do something, because engineer is, it's like everyone can be an engineer. Once you do something and make something, and if life getting better, then you are also engineer. Also, like we forgot to mention something about in terms of environmental problem, we also have to think about like water quality and water pollution, which is also like done by the cooperation between like all the countries like among Asia, because like many rivers in like all over the world is shared by like 2 or 3 or even more countries. So we also need to think about not only like technological term, but also like cooperation between the countries.
I think one thing that you know, in much of Asia, that you know, we feel that environmental problems, it's very easy actually. If you live in Asia, you go to visit Asia, it's actually very easy to feel the gravity of the problem. I think, you know, we're here, we're by the beach, blue skies. Actually, if you lived in Asia, in some of the Asian cities, you know, that is a luxury. That is not basic. You know, you live somewhere in Beijing. I mean, you think, capital of the biggest country in the world, how can the air be like this? I cannot even see my hands. You know, it's a very personal problem for a lot of people. If you're, you know, living in some of emerging Asia, you're worried about, you know, you're actually worried about the water you're drinking. I mean, it's very, very tangible, and I think it's an issue. You're worried about your food. You go to the market, you're not sure if you're actually getting vegetables or poison. You're not sure of that. Can you give us some idea about, you know, these problems are so serious. What are the governments? What are your governments doing about this?
Well, I think the governments are actually trying their best, or at least they're trying, I must say, to create a change. So, but like I said, you know, it's up to the people to take it, and you need to also integrate technology in some elements. For example, in my city, Pune, we had a very simple initiative for waste segregation, where they said, you know, all the organic waste would go in one bin, non-organic waste would go in the other. But this was actually implemented by only a few communities in Pune. And I feel that if technology could have been applied to create awareness, not only in Pune, but also in other cities such as Mumbai, which has almost 20 million people, I think, you know, it could make a lot of difference.
In terms of the government, I mean, I really don't envy the position of the government. I mean, you want, as a country, you want to see your country grow. You want to see economic growth, and you want to incentivize companies to be as productive as they can in order for the economy to grow. You want that, but at the same time, you also want, you know, a clean environment. You also want good, clean water. So, like, how do you foster growth, industrial growth, while also curtailing their you know, what would you call it? Yeah, just the harmful effects of development. And so honestly, I think it's a conundrum that the governments are facing, and I don't really think that it's something that the governments can necessarily handle on their own. And that's why it goes back to having more private, such as the social enterprises, private solutions to help assist possible policies that the government will implement. So I don't think the government by itself will be able to handle these situations, these issues.
Say something.
So if you don't mind, I want to share another experience I had through EWB. EWB is Engineers Without Borders. I think you might know Doctors Without Borders. It's famous over the world. And so I went to Nepal in this village, which is located in the top of the mountain. Actually, like cloud is underneath my feet. So it's really high place, and they don't get any access of electricity or little amount of electricity they get. And like we were helping them with biogas, which is also maybe like related to appropriate technology, because they're using like excrement from human being and also cows to create the like gas, so you can using for the cooking. So what I want to say is, I hope government can, encourage more young engineers and students go and see who really need the help. Not only in our country, but also like, some certain countries in Asia that really need help. So I hope, government can encourage more so that like young, future, engineers can actually see what's the problem, and they can come back and think about, and also, think about the solution we can solve together.
Great. Well, moving on to some of the issues associated with income inequality and poverty. Tell us a little bit about what you think can be done. Just now you mentioned top-down approaches, bottom-up approaches. What is being done, and what can be done? I don't think anybody in the world has solved this problem, so we want to hear ideas.
We didn't mention much about the problem in terms of population, aging society, because in the next session we will also discuss it about. And like aging society, I will mention briefly because like it's the problem related to growth of economy also. And also, like, for example, Korea or Japan is so tensed, and I think for them it's hard to like find someone who to marry, and also like giving a birth, because they don't think it's enough time, money, or space. So I suggest like use the wide fast broadband in Korea to like let people to work remote and like come to work in the office like 2 or 3 per week, 2 or 3 days per week. Then people like living outside of city, which means they have some more space and time for kids. So I think it can also like help the problem with in terms of low birth rate.
In the perspective of India, to try and bridge the gap between the income inequality, at the rural level, at least, the government is doing a lot of things. They are into microfinancing. They have set up gram panchayats, which are basically village councils. They are tapping onto this social structure that is already prevalent in Indian villages, and they are using it to their advantage. They're setting up bank loans. And the idea behind this is that if you can give these people the initial capital resources to develop, their own resources, their own values, so that then they become self-sufficient. So this is the sort of thinking that is going on currently. But at least I feel, in the urban perspective, there's not a lot being done. I see that rural India steps are being taken, but when it comes to urban India, not really. It's because the scale of urbanization and the speed of urbanization is so fast, the government is finding it hard to keep up with it.
In Singapore, at least, I believe the graduates or university students, after we graduate, we kind of expect to have a good job. And that's where I think the income disparity comes, when you expect something but you don't get it. In the end, you just don't feel motivated to try and push further. I feel for Singapore, at least, one of the ways to actually go about it is for young people to start up. Why I say that is because jobs nowadays, they can't really give you the kind of money that you want. Neither can startups, mind you. But then there's also, yeah, initially at least. But the thing is that if you follow, if you follow what you really want to do, you find value in that. It's not just about the money anymore. And that, to me, actually can help in the income disparity, because people are more motivated to work. They're more motivated to succeed in what they're doing. Yeah.
So I think you mentioned an important thing regarding finding what you actually want to do. If you don't even know that, I mean, how are you even going to do a startup? What are you going to start up? You know, so I think the issue in Korea is because people's goals have become so focused on getting into a particular company or a conglomerate, people have lost sight of what they're actually really good at, or where their talents are, what they could thrive in. So I think if the education system, or even starting from the family, just encouraging people to discover what they can actually be good at and what they would actually be interested in, that can actually be the start, the foundation for innovation and for startups and things like that. So again, it just needs to be there needs to be a paradigm shift in the people, in the students especially when they're young, to stop looking at just the exam, the university entrance exam, or just looking at one particular big company, but really focusing more on their interests and where their talents are. I think that's a good place to start.
I think you've nicely kind of segued to the area of education. Actually, education, the education system being potentially a very powerful solution to some of the challenges that we're facing. You know, yet, as we talked about earlier, you know, there are a lot of systemic changes that need to be made, and it needs to start somewhere. You know, are you all optimistic about it? Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? What are you seeing in Asia?
I feel very optimistic about it. For example, with regards to education, earlier I mentioned about Teach for India, and I also mentioned about the DataWind company, which is manufacturing the Akash tablet. So I feel you have to combine factors, you know, because technology on its own would not be enough to solve the challenges. Because in countries like in India, you know, in the rural parts, people won't know how to operate a tablet computer. They need to be trained. So a solution probably I would propose is, you know, Teach for India using these Akash tablets to first train their own instructors and then pass it on to the rural population.
I would approach this question more on a, I think, philosophical view. To me, human society will always have to progress. Right? Every solution we come up with will have its own problems, and we're just gonna keep on innovating all the way. So I am optimistic about the Asian young generation, because I'm optimistic about humanity, that we will find a way to move on to the next stage somehow. But at the same time, I think it's still important that we are always, well, feeding back to ourselves about the information about what new problems have I created with my new solution. And I believe, well, with internet, with the information age, that will help, because there's a continuous feedback loop that we will get. And our young, I mean, think about the last time you saw a 3-year-old using an iPad. They pick up fast. They pick up what we, or even the older generation, could not pick up, just because they're growing up in an age that has changed, and they're able to adapt to it. Okay, and it's that the ability to adapt in us, I guess, that actually will drive us forward. So I'm very optimistic about what we can do.
Samuel mentioned the internet and technology and how it affects the next generation, the infants. And it's interesting to note how it breaks certain cultural barriers of the current generation. There is this well-known stereotype about Indian mothers who want their sons and daughters to be either engineers or doctors. And I was recently told that that's a stereotype even shared by Jews. Even they want their sons and daughters to be engineers and doctors. Think about it, they are quite stable professions. But now it's because of this access to new technology and internet, these cultural barriers are being broken. Parents are realizing that it's not all about your marks, it's not all about your social status and your exams. It's about what your child really wants to do in life. And like he mentioned, if your child wants to do something truly revolutionary and he wants to move humanity ahead, parents are actually allowing their children to do this. So I'm very optimistic about the future, yes.
Great. Well, you know, we've heard from all our panelists, but I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions from the floor. And, you know, I want to throw it out to to all of you and see if you have any questions for the panelists.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth from National University of Singapore and also working in an Israeli startup company called One2Math. So my question is, there's this term for our generation called the strawberry generation, if you've heard of it. It means that we are fragile, easily bruised, we are grown in like greenhouses, and we fetch a higher price in the market for no good reason. So compared to, contrasting that with the pressure to succeed, like in the education system, where the grading for Asians, it's A is average, B is bad, C is crap, the D is death. So there's this pressure, and yet there's also this sense of entitlement, like you said, complacency. How should we solve this, if you have any ideas?
As Nishant and Samuel mentioned, we are in the information age where technology, like for example, the internet, can break through cultural barriers, and I feel what this is doing is it's changing attitudes. It's basically influencing the thought process of not only today's generation but also the previous generation. And there's a saying which goes like, bad attitude is like a flat tire. You can't go anywhere unless you replace it. And I feel technology, the information age, is pumping in air at that tire, and we are definitely moving ahead.
Gentleman over there.
Graham Jackson, University of Haifa, MBA Program Director. The panel members have referred to three trends which exist today in a way are converging. One of them is the development of technology that is leading to mass information. Another thing that you've mentioned is the improvements in education and mass education, education of the masses. And the third thing that you mentioned is the use of modern smartphones, iPads, whatever, which is allowing mass communication. So what you've got today is a convergence of three things: mass information, mass education, and mass communication. So that's where we are today, according to the sort of ideas that you've been presenting. But what I'd like to ask the panel is, where's it all leading to? Or in other words, if you consider the convergence of these three different trends and perhaps other things that you might add in, where is it going to get to? One of the things that we heard about India, for example, is mass innovation, bottom-up innovation from people in rural areas and elsewhere. But I'm not convinced that we really have a clear picture of where it's all leading to or where it could lead to. And so I'd like some thoughts on that.
Well, I agree with you, which is why when Janet mentioned that there is a disconnect when we hear that Asia is expected to be the next superpower in terms of economy, and yet there are so many protests. It's because Asia has a lot of potential. You're right, there is a lot of cultural innovation in India, but what can we do about it? And like Dr. Arvind mentioned, it's about trying to bridge the gap between this cultural innovation and systemic innovation so that you can lead to overall growth. Samuel mentioned that at the end of the day, the philosophical answer is that humanity will continue to grow and progress. I would say the end goal is that, for humanity to continue to grow and progress. And that is the end goal that we are moving towards by mass communication and mass exchange of ideas and education.
Anyone else want to add?
I am like member of like in the panel like Tiger Cubs, but I'm saying I am a bit old-fashioned than other people in my age. It is important we use our own technology, what we have right now, but we also, when like technology is giving us something really fast, like mass information, and we can get it in 1 second and 2 seconds by searching in the Google, but like everything moves so fast and a lot of information, we are missing a lot of things like traditional value or historical, issues. So I think if we can balance together, then like it will be, we can have a bright future. Not only technology is growing up, but also like we know about like what we are doing and our future.
Hi, I'm Jackie Louis from Ego IP. After hearing all this and being the first time in Israel and visiting Jerusalem, and Israel being perhaps Jerusalem being perhaps the religious center of the world, and and all this history, I hear about all this progress, but how does the spirit, the human spirit, and the human soul factor in to the the entire equation of so-called progress? I mean, the young generation, very often we hear of it as being the me generation. It's all about me. It's me. It's what I want to do, what I want to achieve, what is there for me. How does this actually equate into progress? And what are your views on the human spirit and the human soul, and how does that add to progress?
Yeah, I'll take the question. I'll just give you a bit of background. I'm actually also been staying in a kibbutz Sama, for any of you who know it. I've been staying there for the past 2, coming to 3 months. It's interesting because when you talk about the individual, that is where I gained the new concept of how powerful the individual in a community is. In Sama, one thing I'll just share is they share a similar bank account. Everybody uses the same credit card. Everybody has a credit card on their own, but it's linked to the same bank account. And I did ask before, how does that even work? Wouldn't someone just exploit, just use up all the money at once, and then the whole place basically just is destroyed, you see, when there's no money. But one thing I've realized is, much as they respect the individual respects the community. And that the idea that the individual on his own is able to understand how he affects the community and what role he plays in the community, that is very important. And I believe when you talked about mass information and mass communication, these are avenues that actually help us to understand our community better, not just in our country, not just in our region, but also globally. We're able to understand culturally, we're able to understand what's happening in other parts of the world through these kind of media and in medium. And in that sense, the individual can learn to respect the community more. And that's how I see innovation moving forward.
So I definitely agree with Samuel. And like you said, I think an individual in isolation has the tendency to be very selfish, self-interested, and ultimately I think that is very self-destructive as well, just being completely focused on oneself only. But just having the opportunity to be in community, whether it is through digital means, through mass communication, through information, or just physically just being in a community like a kibbutz. Not necessarily advocating socialism here per se, but just finding communities. I think is going to be a challenge for our generation, especially because we have everything at our fingertips. So again, it will be a challenge. It's something I think that our generation needs to learn how to do, which it was more natural, I think, for previous generations to be in community, especially in Asia, where community used to be such an important aspect. But I think as our generation and the next generation, there's a greater risk to be in isolation. Therefore, it needs to be more of a voluntary, conscious effort to be within a community setting of some form.
I'm told that we don't have that much time. Can we actually take maybe 2 more questions together, and I'll have the panelists conclude.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Wong. I came from San Francisco for this event. And I have a question regarding the education system. You guys made some very valid points of how it needs to be a cultural shift. And I've heard, like, for example, in China, that part of that shift is a problem with the amount of money and funding given to the faculty for top-tier schools, for example, versus non-top-tier schools. And that shift is even hard at the faculty level with the professors and, you know, how they thinking from non-innovation minded to more innovation minded. So I was wondering if you see that challenge not only in China and other countries, and what do you think is the solution for this teaching at the higher education level?
Last question. Over there in the back.
Yes, regarding it, first of all, I want to really commend the panel, which is as good a panel as experts as can one really expect. It's amazing their depth and their insight, especially regarding education. And this is the issue I want to talk about or ask about. Some of you were quite frank about the situation, the conformity of education and the rigidity of the education system in your countries. Would you be willing to criticize that system in your countries, or you just feel free to speak your mind? And therefore, the problem would remain as it is.
Question about higher education funding and also critique your education system.
Well, I am criticizing our, education system because that's what I took. I also entered a university in Korea, and then I moved to studying here. So I can tell you the difference a bit about Israeli education and then the education I had before. From the primary school, in the class, you are in the primary school level, you are freely ask questions during the class. But the more you go, middle school and high school, now you are all aiming for the university entry exam. So teachers actually say, no, we don't have time for asking questions. So if you have any question, ask me after class. So you don't have any chance to ask question also. You just listen, you observe the knowledge they teach you. So I'm criticize our education system because, as we said before, this learning is not we are learning for learning's sake. We are memorizing the stuff for useful for the exam. And nowadays it's a problem also. We have a course called Korean history, and now it's not compulsory. You can choose if you want to take exam and university entry exam, then you take the course. But if you don't want, then you don't have to take, which is quite not right, because if you want to know about your future, then you need to know the history before. So I think the system has to change a little bit, make sure people know about all the traditional values and history before they are learning something ahead.
I believe the problem of education becomes a problem when it's only seen as a formal education that is relevant and is applicable. I have come to the point where I've realized university education alone is not going to get me anywhere in life. There needs to be informal learning. There needs to be lifelong learning, and which is one of the reasons why I'm actually here in Israel in the first place. It was through my school, but it's not a formal education in that sense. First point on funding. Well, I don't know the exact figures in my school. I don't think I have access to that either. But one thing I do hope for is that if learning is taken, if education is taken as learning, then it's not the funding is not important. Because as long as people have the knowledge, they're able to share their experiences, share their ideas, that is worthwhile. And about criticizing, I'll say criticizing the university, okay, in the formal education level. Yeah, much as we can criticize it, I personally don't see anything happen. We have had feedbacks. I don't see anything much happening. And I can understand, because it's a large institution. There are a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy that we cannot escape. And that's why I think going back to even ideas that we had about social enterprises, about ground-up initiatives, that is where, I mean, I see at least learning having value, where you kind of point that you just realize I can learn, but on my own, through the internet even. I don't even have to have a formal education. But when you learn for the enjoyment of learning, rather than just a formal education.
And when you spoke about criticizing the education, I criticize it, but not the usual elements. The usual suspects when anybody criticizes education is, oh, it's the government, you know, they're not setting down the right policies. Oh, it's the universities, like he mentioned, you know, like you go after the universities or the teachers. I actually blame the students and the parents. There is an education system that is set up, right? And the idea behind it was not that the students have to get good marks. The idea behind it was that the students have to learn something. It is us, the students and the parents, who decided it was about the marks. So there is an inherent problem in us abusing the system too. So before we can start criticizing that the system is not working for us, I guess we have to also introspect and figure out why we are not making it work for us.
Well, I differ with Nishant in a way, and I think I would like to criticize the system itself, especially in India, because we have this one aspect where we have a reservation system in our education system, where based on your caste, you're allocated particular number of seats, and then you can enter, you know, top-tier institutes. But I feel an equal chance needs to be given to everyone. You know, the education is much more beyond reservation.
Great, thank you very much. I think this should be the end of our panel. I hope that this panel has offered you a very unique insight into some of the perspectives of those people from Asia who are going to really be the leaders in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I hope that you'll engage in conversations with them throughout the duration of this conference and beyond, and hopefully work out some of the solutions to these intractable problems. So thank you very much.